What's up, girl?
After an old friendship evolved into romance, she started turning her troubled life around.
It was just something about him. She loved him so much. It's like her goals had changed. She was starting to get on the right track.
But she would never get a chance to see her dreams come to fruition.
They left her to bleed out.
What kind of monster does that? It was pure torture.
Had her past come back to haunt her?
There was a story about her ripping off some drug dealers.
She owed $15,000.
This guy had been very public about his desire to get revenge.
Or could the killer be someone closer to home?
There are several twists in the story.
He had a side piece who just had his baby.
The lies get even more bizarre. I felt lost. I felt betrayed. My family, myself, everyone, we were just in disbelief.
June 18th, 2017, Detroit, Michigan. It's a lazy Sunday in the Motor City.
Detroit, it has its ups and downs. There's a lot of crime. There's a lot of struggles.
I worked homicide for about 10 years, and I think that the police are doing as best as they can.
At 7 a.m., 30-year-old Jada Martin is walking her dog when she notices something odd.
A car is parked in front of her neighbor's house she hasn't seen before.
But that's not what catches her attention.
There's someone in the back of the car.
It's a young woman who initially looks like she's sleeping.
However, it's soon clear to Jada that the woman isn't asleep.
She's completely unresponsive, and it doesn't look like she's breathing.
Jada rushes up to her neighbor Amani Dixon's door.
Hey, Jada. What's going on? Yeah, there's a woman outside. She's in that car. I tried knocking. She's not waking up. I think there's something wrong. Yeah, come here. Come on.
Jada leads Amani over to the car and shows her what she saw.
Oh my God, that's Letitia. Letitia! Letitia!
Amani says she's met Letitia before. Letitia has been dating a friend of hers.
But Amani doesn't know why Letitia is outside her home in this condition.
We need to call 911. Hello?
Letitia Barganier was a social butterfly from the day she was born.
She was the livest one out of the group. Energetic, just the best energy. She was a wonderful person, and she just would make the room glow. Whatever she could do to put a smile on that person's face, that's what she was gonna do.
But growing up in the streets of Detroit wasn't always easy.
It's hard to grow up here in Detroit. Struggle, drugs, violence, everyday life, trying to survive.
And as a teen, Letitia had fallen prey to the temptations around her.
She didn't have a good childhood, far as in following the rules and running into the wrong crowd. It made her like skip school and involve herself in activities that wasn't good for her. She didn't finish school, but she knew all the rules to the streets. She was a great hustler.
Life in the fast lane eventually caught up with Letitia, and at age 29, she ended up in jail after a string of traffic violations.
Once she was released and came home, you know, she was just talking to me like, I just want to do better. The way she started changing and the way she started doing things different, it made me happy.
And as she made a fresh start, Letitia set her sights on a career.
She did want to be a hairstylist. I would watch her, you know, doing somebody's hair, and it was like, you know, how did you know how to do that? How did you know how to braid? You used to do basically everybody's hair in the family. She was talking about getting a job and just doing better for herself.
Letitia wasn't doing it alone either. She had a burgeoning relationship with an old friend, 37-year-old Demetrius Montgomery.
What's up, girl?
What's up?
When he came around, you could just tell that she had butterflies.
They had that crazy kind of relationship. Like, they both goofy, they fight, like this, that type of relationship.
My family was close with a lot of his family. So there was, a tight-knit bond there.
Everybody knew him and everybody accepted him. He came to birthday parties, all different types of family functions. Us all growing up in the same neighborhood, it was like he was a part of our family.
But now, Letitia's promising future is in jeopardy.
Letitia! We need to call 911. Hello?
A call comes in reporting a non-responsive woman in the back of a car.
Yeah, there's a woman outside my friend's house. She's not waking up. We're knocking. She's not waking up. We need help.
Officers are dispatched to the location. When they arrive, there's an SUV parked in front of the home. They see the young black woman laying in the back seat.
After jimmying the car door open, officers are able to get inside the vehicle.
They try to awaken her, but they get no response.
It's immediately clear that the woman is deceased.
At that point, the officers secure the scene and radio for backup.
Yeah, we've got one unresponsive here. Go ahead and start EMS, please.
Finding out what happened to her will be easier said than done.
They didn't know what was wrong. She didn't have any blood on her.
They see no obvious signs of trauma. So how did this young woman die?
After several troubled years on the streets of Detroit, 29-year-old Letitia Barganier was making a fresh start with her old friend turned new boyfriend, Demetrius Montgomery.
As she got older, she started changing for better.
She was really in love. She was starting to turn her life around.
Letitia had even moved with Demetrius to Ypsilanti, Michigan, where they shared an apartment.
She was supposed to start a new job at a local hair salon.
But now, instead of embarking on a new career, Letitia is dead.
Police have found Letitia deceased in the back of an SUV in West Detroit.
31.
She was over 30 miles away from her home in Ypsilanti, Michigan.
How did she die? When detectives arrive on the scene, they're just as puzzled as first responders.
Police didn't initially see any blood or signs of trauma.
They're thinking she may have died from natural causes or possibly OD'd on something.
However, upon closer examination, it's clear there's foul play involved.
There. Look at her arm.
They found out that she had cuts on her arms.
That indicated defensive wounds.
A closer examination of her body reveals a large stab wound to her abdomen. It's very clear that she had been attacked.
There is no doubt that Letitia has been brutally murdered.
But the condition of the vehicle doesn't reflect the nature of this crime.
What is strange is that Letitia has been violently stabbed, but the back of the car is pristine and clean.
It was incredibly odd that there was no blood found inside the car.
The lack of blood leads detectives to believe Letitia had been killed elsewhere.
If she had been stabbed in the car, there would have been a lot more blood. But she was completely clean. She had been washed and dressed and then put in the car.
You took the time to wash her, to bathe her. Like, what kind of monster does that?
Hoping for answers, detectives turn to the two women who discovered Letitia's body, Jada Martin and Amani Dixon.
Amani explained that she's actually familiar with Letitia Barganier.
She says Letitia has been dating one of her friends, Demetrius Montgomery.
The SUV where Letitia's body was found actually belongs to Demetrius.
Do you know where he is?
No, but that's his car.
And you never saw him drive it over here or have had any contact with him in the past 24 hours?
No.
This information sets off alarm bells for detectives.
They found it odd that Demetrius was not around.
Nobody drove his truck but both of them. He wouldn't let nobody else drive it.
Okay, thank you, ladies.
Detectives know they need to speak to Demetrius immediately. After getting his number from Imani, they give him a call.
We're gonna need you to come down to the station and answer some questions, Demetrius. Thank you. He said absolutely.
Back at the station, detectives sit down with Demetrius.
He seemed shocked to learn from police that Letitia is dead.
He's also shocked that her body was found in the backseat of his car.
He immediately has an explanation about why his car wasn't in his possession at the time Letitia's body was found.
He tells them that his car had been stolen outside of his apartment.
When was that?
About a week ago.
Demetrius says he hasn't seen Letitia in almost as long.
He also says that he and Letitia had a big fight, and they broke up, and he hasn't seen her in several days.
You know how it goes. She starts getting on me about something, and then she ghosts me.
You think she may have been the person to take the car?
It's definitely possible.
Demetrius also seems to have an alibi.
Demetrius, can you account for your whereabouts over the past 24 hours?
Work, mostly. I picked up some overtime.
And you didn't see Letitia at all?
No.
Demetrius tells investigators that he has no idea of what happened.
However, Demetrius does have another lead for detectives.
He tells them that Letitia ran with a pretty scary crowd.
According to Demetrius, Letitia affiliated with a lot of gangs and drug dealers.
She's been trying to get out of that world, but it's not easy to walk away from.
He tells investigators that recently some of those guys had become angry with her.
He says that Letitia stole as much as $15,000 from one of her drug dealer friends.
This drug dealer, he got a name?
Malik Thompson. He's not the kind of guy you want to burn. You know what I'm saying?
Maybe this was a payback.
According to Demetrius, Malik had been publicly slamming Letitia in recent weeks.
Demetrius points the investigators to a series of Facebook posts by this drug dealer.
The guy was adamant about getting the money back or getting revenge.
And in fact, threatens to kill her if she doesn't give it back.
Despite progress made in recent years, Detroit remains one of the most dangerous big cities in the United States today. According to 2020 data from the FBI, the city's violent crime rate ranks second among cities of more than 100,000 people, and approximately 70% of the Motor City's murders are drug-related. In the summer of 2017, Detroit police are investigating the tragic death of 29-year-old Letitia Barganier. For Letitia's loved ones, the news comes as a complete shock.
I dropped down, started throwing up. My body got weak. I just couldn't believe it.
I just was praying it wasn't real.
After talking to Letitia's boyfriend, Demetrius Montgomery, homicide detectives have reason to believe her murder could have been some sort of payback.
He said that she hung out with bad people, she hung out with drug dealers, and she had played on somebody for $15,000.
According to Demetrius, that somebody was 33-year-old drug dealer Malik Thompson.
This guy had been very public about his desire to either get his money back or get revenge on Letitia.
He had made posts on his own Facebook page threatening Letitia.
Detectives immediately bring him in for questioning.
Once in the interview room, Malik initially refuses to cooperate with detectives.
So Malik, what can you tell me about Letitia Barganier?
Nothing, man. I barely know her.
But when detectives confront Malik with the posts he made on social media, he starts talking.
At that point, he tells them everything.
Man, look, it's not what it looks like.
He admits to making these threatening remarks on Facebook, but he denies having anything to do with Letitia's murder.
I wasn't happy that she ripped me off, but I didn't kill her, all right?
He says he just wanted his money back.
According to Malik, he hadn't even been in town at the time of the murder.
I was in Chicago. There was no way I could have done any of that.
Chicago?
Yeah, I was, staying with my cousin.
He offers up an alibi, and it checks out.
Malik also offers up a tantalizing new lead.
He tells police that Letitia wasn't the only one in that relationship that ended up on the bad side of a drug beef.
So what do you mean by that?
Why don't you ask her boyfriend, all right?
He tells him that Demetrius himself was a drug dealer.
Word on the street was that Demetrius had been ripping off some of his business associates.
Maybe Demetrius sold drugs to the wrong people.
Could the rumor be true that he had angered some potential business associates? And are these business associates willing to kill his girlfriend in order to send a message?
But Malik claims Demetrius's drug associates aren't the only people who would have reason to want Letitia dead.
According to Malik, there was another woman in Demetrius's life.
Demetrius had another girlfriend on the side named Simone Robinson.
In fact, Demetrius had gotten Simone pregnant and had a 2-month-old baby with her.
Could Simone have killed Letitia to have Demetrius all to herself? After wrapping up their interview with Malik Thompson, detectives get another piece of information that makes a crime of passion seem more likely than a drug beef.
Once the autopsy came, we found out that she was stabbed multiple times.
In total, there were 17 separate stab wounds, 1 to Letitia's abdomen, and more than a dozen injuries to her head.
Initially, they couldn't see any stab wounds on her because she had been cleaned up. And when they shaved her head, they could see all the stab wounds at the top of her head.
It was very clear that she suffered some pretty serious wounds, both to her abdomen, her head, as well as her arms.
One of the most disturbing things is that the stab wounds to her head are not the wounds that killed her. The one stab wound to her abdomen was the last punch that killed her.
The knife had tore into the young lady's liver, and that was what the cause of death was. It would have taken at least 12 minutes to succumb to bleeding out.
I'm only imagining begging for her life when one more wound, one more stab, one more punch to her abdomen took her life.
This was clearly a very emotional crime led out by someone who had a bitter resentment against Letitia.
Could that person be Simone Robinson?
If she felt like Letitia was in her way of having a relationship with Demetrius, she had reason to want her dead.
Detectives wanted to speak to Simone right away, and soon they'd get their chance.
June 20th, 2017, Detroit, Michigan. Detectives investigating the murder of Letitia Barganier have just learned that she wasn't the only woman in Demetrius Montgomery's life.
Letitia's boyfriend had a side piece who just had his baby. Could she have decided to kill Letitia for Demetrius' affection?
Usually when someone's stabbed, a lot of times, it's a crime of passion.
Love make you do some crazy stuff.
When detectives bring 30-year-old Simone Robinson in for questioning, she concedes that she and Letitia had butted heads in the past.
Simone admits that Demetrius is the father of her newborn.
I remember one time my cousin actually fought her in front of him. He actually whooped the girl's ass.
But Simone insists she had nothing to do with Letitia's murder.
That doesn't mean I killed Letitia.
Simone is horrified when she realizes that she's a suspect. Sure, Simone wanted Demetrius to leave Letitia for her and the baby, but she didn't want her dead.
Although when investigators press Simone for her whereabouts on the night of the murder, she offers up a flimsy alibi.
She says she was home all night taking care of the newborn.
Police have no choice but to let Simone go for the time being.
All right, Simone, we appreciate your time. Let's walk you out.
It is nearly impossible for police to prove or disprove what she says.
They didn't charge her because mainly they didn't have enough evidence to charge her.
However, as detectives are wrapping up their interview with Simone,
Homicide.
they get a call from Letitia and Demetrius's landlord that will turn the case on its head.
The landlord went into the house to get something, and that's when they actually discovered the crime scene.
No, thank you. Yeah, we'll be over there immediately.
When detectives make the half-hour drive to Demetrius and Letitia's apartment in Ypsilanti, they discover a treasure trove of evidence.
When they walked through, the first thing they noticed on the couch was the bloody knife.
When they went into the bedroom, they found 2 more knives.
Both of those knives have broken handles, and the blades also have dried blood on them.
As the detectives continued to investigate, they found a pair of pajamas.
The pajamas have a slash in the stomach area that would match where Letitia was stabbed.
The sheets on the bed are clean, but detectives suspect they have been changed.
There was a garbage bag that had been filled with bloody sheets.
Investigators suspect Letitia's murder took place right there inside the bedroom.
When CSI uses luminol, they discover that there are large quantities of blood in the bedroom.
9 times out of 10, and I should say 10 times out of 10, if a person bleeds that much, that's where the person's gonna expire.
The luminol also reveals a trail of blood that leads detectives to the bathroom.
It appeared that Letitia's body had been dragged into the bathroom and washed in the shower until her wounds stopped bleeding.
From there, it would have been relatively easy to move Letitia's body from the apartment to the car under the cover of darkness.
For detectives, it's becoming obvious that Demetrius has been lying to them all along.
CSI officers manage to pull fingerprints from the garbage bag that is found with the bed sheets that are soaked in blood. It's a match for prints on file to Demetrius Montgomery.
But where is he now?
Police haven't had any luck getting of him since they last spoke.
It seemed like he may have gone on the run after learning cops were looking into him.
Police decide to circle back around to Demetrius's friend, Imani Dixon, to see if she's heard anything from him in the days since his initial interrogation.
Have you had any contact with Demetrius lately?
Nope, can't say that I have.
Detectives tell Imani that Demetrius is wanted in connection with Letitia's death and warn her if she knows where he is or is withholding any information of that sort, that she could potentially be charged as an accessory.
Pressed by detectives, Imani finally admits that she wasn't completely upfront with them the last time they spoke.
Imani admits that she saw Demetrius the night before Letitia's body was discovered.
Oh, okay, look, he just showed up out the blue.
She wound up telling him that, well, Demetrius did come by, his hands were bloody, and he did ask her for her SUV keys.
Hey, Demetrius.
Hey, yo, can I borrow your car for the night? I just need it for a few hours.
Okay, but I need it back tomorrow before work, okay?
Imani admits the whole thing seemed a bit sketchy, but she never expected what she'd discover the next morning.
Oh my God, that's Letitia.
She said she hadn't told detectives that she had seen Demetrius that day because she was trying to protect him.
She was also scared what he might do to her if she cooperated with police.
We'll be in contact.
Unfortunately, Imani isn't able to provide much more information.
She swears she has no idea where Demetrius is and hasn't spoken to him since he borrowed her car.
As Detroit police scour the city for Demetrius, detectives decide to switch gears and pull Letitia's phone records.
They're hoping to find out what contact she had with him before she was killed.
And that's when they make another shocking discovery against their prime suspect.
Detectives find a series of disturbing text messages from Demetrius.
Demetrius has been texting her and threatening her, and actually threatening to kill her.
In Detroit, Michigan, homicide detectives now suspect that 37-year-old Demetrius Montgomery murdered his girlfriend, Letitia Barganier, inside their apartment.
In the 2 days leading up to the discovery of Letitia's body, Demetrius sent her text messages stating that he wished she would die.
They found messages where he was threatening to kill her.
In the texts, Demetrius tells Letitia he can't wait to leave her for the mother of his child, Simone Robinson.
His reasoning was that Simone had a better job and that she had more money and that he could have a better life with her and their newborn.
But if that's the case, why hadn't Demetrius simply ended his relationship with Letitia?
Was it selfish jealousy? He didn't want Letitia anymore, but didn't want anyone else to have her.
As detectives ponder that theory, they receive an unexpected visitor, Letitia's friend, Alexis White.
Lady says she has information on the Letitia Barganier murder investigation.
Have a seat.
Thank you. Alexis says she'd briefly been roommates with Letitia and Demetrius.
I moved to Cleveland about a few months ago, but as soon as I knew she was dead, I knew he had did it.
Alexis tells detectives that behind closed doors, Demetrius had a sadistic streak he loved to unleash on Letitia.
Their relationship was very volatile.
It was manipulation, it was emotional abuse, it was mental abuse, and that was the cycle that led to the physical abuse.
You saw him get physical with her?
Oh yeah. It was really crazy at what he had did.
She recalled Letitia and Demetrius getting into a fight that ended with Demetrius tackling her to the ground.
Letitia was wearing real long eyelashes that a lot of these young women wear, and he really didn't care for that.
He held her down, and he took a lighter, he lit it, and went across her eyelashes and singed her eyelashes off.
There was other previous incidents of domestic violence, but I'd say that was pretty horrible.
It was spiraling out of control.
Despite the worsening abuse, Alexis says Letitia refused to break things off with Demetrius.
When it comes to domestic violence cases, it does happen quite frequently where the victim in the case decides they don't want to press charges.
The perception that it's easy to leave is the furthest from true. It's many factors that can play into why an individual doesn't just leave.
For years, the couple had managed to hide the violence from Letitia's family.
What's up? Once I met him in 2007, he was a sweetheart. He was actually really nice.
We always acted cool when we was around. I never thought that it would be him that killed her.
With the help of Letitia's family, police launch a citywide manhunt to bring Demetrius to justice.
Everybody was outraged about this, and family, friends, strangers were out looking for him, posting on social media, asking had anybody seen Demetrius Montgomery.
There was times I felt like I was a detective because I wasn't giving up. I don't care what time of night, day it was. I was looking into stuff myself.
Everybody in my family, they went to the extra mile to make sure that he got the consequences that he needed.
In the end, it's a routine traffic stop more than 700 miles away that finally brings Demetrius head-to-head with law enforcement.
On June 25th, 2017, officers in Lincoln, Alabama pull over a Dodge Charger for failing to stop at a stop sign.
They noticed that passenger opens the door, gets out, and starts running. And that triggered them to pursue him.
They chased him. Finally, they wound up tasing him.
Hands behind your back. Hands behind your back.
He's trying to actually take the taser from the police and tase the police.
The officers placed Demetrius under arrest.
They find that there's an open warrant for him in Detroit for the murder of Letitia Wagoneer.
He's then extradited back to Michigan, where Detroit detectives cannot wait to question him about Letitia's murder.
But when detectives get Demetrius back inside the interrogation room, what he says will throw them for a loop.
Demetrius swears he's innocent and can lead police to the real murderers. He tells the police he saw the men who did it.
I swear to God, man, it's the honest truth.
If you feel helpless watching your loved ones be abused, try to put yourself in that loved one's shoes and understand how helpless they may feel. Be open. Don't degrade them. Don't judge them, because nobody plans to be in a violent and volatile relationship. Nobody plans that. Sometimes you wake up and you're just kind of there. Just be there to support them and be there when they finally do get the courage and the strength to leave.
Two weeks after police found his girlfriend, Letitia Wagoneer, stabbed to death in the back of his SUV, murder suspect Demetrius Montgomery is now in custody. But even when confronted with the damning evidence found inside the apartment he shared with Letitia, Demetrius refuses to admit any wrongdoing.
When detectives speak to Demetrius, he continues to deny having anything to do with Letitia's murder.
Demetrius, we know. You killed her in the apartment.
I swear, it wasn't me.
Now there are several twists in the story.
According to Demetrius, he and Letitia were at home watching TV on the night of June 17th when the front door burst open.
That's when two men broke into their apartment and held the two of them at gunpoint.
Demetrius tells police he's convinced the two masked men were connected to the drug dealer Letitia had ripped off.
Supposedly, they said that Letitia owed them $15,000.
Where's my money? Well, let's go. Let's go.
He says one of the guys took Letitia to another room.
Demetrius says Letitia and the assailant weren't in the other room for long.
They came back a few minutes later with Letitia holding her stomach, and the man stated that he had to stab Letitia in order for her to give up the location of the money.
Demetrius claims that once they had the cash, the intruders left as quickly as they had come.
You okay?
Yeah.
He says that once the intruders leave, him and Letitia sit on the couch and laugh about what happened.
That was crazy. What?
He claims that Letitia said that, oh, he just poked me a little bit, it didn't really hurt.
To detectives, this claim sounds bizarre.
The more he went on, it just became increasingly more ludicrous.
Regardless, they let Demetrius continue on with his story.
We thought they would come back, though. That's why we went to my friend Amani's place.
According to Demetrius, the idea was to get out of town until things blew over.
He says they changed out of their pajamas, grabbed a few things, and got in the car to head to Detroit. But Letitia was exhausted after the ordeal.
He claimed that she decided to lay down in the back seat so she could take a nap during the drive.
However, when they arrived at Amani's house, Demetrius says he realized that Letitia's injuries were more serious than she initially let on.
According to Demetrius, that's when he realized she was dead.
He says he panicked and decided to borrow Imani's SUV to flee the scene. He knew this looked bad.
So why didn't you tell us all this in the beginning? I didn't think you'd believe me.
Demetrius is right. Detectives don't believe a word of his story.
It certainly didn't account for the excess of blood police discovered all around the apartment.
She got stabbed 17 times, including major organ damage.
Anybody that you love, if anything was to go wrong with them, you're gonna try to get the first responders. You're not trying to drive miles away.
That just shows you the type of sick individual that he was. You're really sitting here still degrading this woman, making it seem like she had done something so wrong and went out and got herself murdered, when all along, you know what you did to her.
Detectives charged Demetrius with first-degree murder.
When we found out he was caught, it was almost like a celebration in the family.
But when the trial gets underway in May of 2019, the family's elation has given way to grim resolve.
It was very difficult going to court because we have to sit and look at this man. We want to tear his head off,
It was mixed emotions everywhere, but it was well worth it because we definitely needed justice for her.
According to the prosecution, the crime scene paints a clear picture of how Letitia died.
Demetrius Montgomery murdered Letitia in order to get her out of the way so that he could have this life with the mother of his child.
They say that the murder began with an argument in the kitchen.
What do you mean it's over? It's you mean what I mean. Why can't you get through your head? We're done. It's over.
They got into an altercation. A fight broke out.
At some point in the fight, Demetrius grabs a knife and starts stabbing her.
The attack is so violent that the knife breaks, and Letitia takes this opportunity to run towards the bedroom.
Demetrius grabbed another knife and followed her.
In the bedroom, Demetrius continued attacking Letitia.
She did try to fight back. It wasn't enough. She's fighting against a grown man.
When the second knife breaks, he then runs back to the kitchen, grabs a larger knife, goes back to the bedroom, and that's when he stabs Letitia in the abdomen.
When the knife hit her liver, that was almost an automatic death right there.
Once Letitia was dead, Demetrius got to work covering his tracks.
First, he dragged Letitia's body into the shower and washed off all the blood.
I believe he was more worried about blood getting in his car than he was about the life that he had just taken.
Then he cleaned up the apartment and drove her corpse to Detroit.
But when it's the defense's turn to argue their case, they say Demetrius is innocent, and Letitia's real killers are still on the loose.
They stick with Demetrius's story about two intruders forcing their way into the apartment.
The defense pointed out that there was a bloody shoe print at the apartment.
The shoe print doesn't match any of the shoes that Demetrius owns.
They argued that that was proof that somebody else was at the apartment.
However, after both sides rest, the jury quickly sides with the prosecution.
The jurors ultimately find him guilty of first-degree murder.
He was sentenced to life in prison without parole.
When we received the verdict of life, just the word life to me, to all of us, it was joy.
It was a relief for me and for my family. I was actually happy because this is a point in time where you're not getting off the hook. Justice half got served.
I was the one that gave the victim's statement at the end of court. And this man says to me, Aunt Quinetta, you know I ain't murdered your sister. Oh, it took everything in me. Everything. Like, I am standing here looking at murder in his face that killed my sister, and you have the audacity to tell me you didn't do it?
Letitia's family hopes that by sharing her story, they can help other women avoid a similar fate.
There are so many more Letitia Bagoniers out there.
It was like losing a big sister, a role model, someone you love dearly. I miss her so much.
I just say it all the time, love doesn't hurt. Love is not a punch or a slap. That's not love.
Walk away from that situation before it gets too late. And that's the best thing, smartest thing you can do.
Abuse is never okay. If you or someone you love is in an abusive relationship, there is help available. Call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE.
Morris knew that this was no normal day. The transition from a routine shift to a life-altering case can happen in the blink of an eye. When the law enforcement team arrived at the riverbank, the process of bringing the individual to shore was a somber and physically demanding task. Officers had to reach into the water, grasping the clothing of the deceased to ease him back toward the land. Initial thoughts often drift toward accidents, perhaps a boater who lost his balance, or a swimmer overcome by the current. However, the moment the body was secured on the bank, the illusion of an accident vanished. The victim's wrists and ankles were bound tightly with speaker wire. This was no unfortunate mishap. This was a clear, calculated act of homicide. The presence of water in a murder case is a detective's nightmare. It is a volatile element that does terrible things to the human form, accelerating decomposition and erasing the delicate whispers of forensic evidence. In the humid environment of the South, even in the months of February and March, the elements conspire to make a body unrecognizable within a short span of time. At that moment, positive identification was an impossible goal. Yet, as investigator Maurice looked at the remains, his mind retreated to a missing person report that had crossed his desk recently. A woman named Brittany Green had come forward to report that the father of her 2 children, Leon Harrison Jr., better known to everyone as J.R., had vanished. A man with a family, a man with children who expected his call every single night, does not simply vanish from the face of the earth without a trace. Brittany had explained to the authorities that J.R. was 32 years old, a man with a vibrant personality and a distinctive rose tattoo on his inner right forearm. As Morris prepared for the autopsy, a sense of nervous anticipation settled over him. This was a milestone in his career, a gruesome necessity that separates the novices from the veteran. The medical examiner confirmed the grim reality. While the level of decomposition made it difficult to pinpoint the exact cause of death, the bindings alone justified the classification of homicide. The body bore lacerations on the belly, though they were not deep enough to cause a fatal loss of blood. The presence of wildlife in the river, including alligators that typically prefer live prey, added another layer of complexity to the physical state of the remains. The autopsy yielded a singular, vital piece of information that transformed the search for a missing person into a hunt for a killer. The rose tattoo on the right arm was still visible, confirming that the man in the river was indeed Leon Harrison Jr. In the world of homicide investigation, there is an old saying that one goes from being the new guy to the old guy in about 30 minutes. The weight of responsibility began to press down on Maurice. He started his work by diving into the life of the man who had been stolen from his children. Brittany Green spoke of a man who was funny, outgoing, and possessed a smile that could bridge any gap. His son recalled the joy of a father who cheered from the sidelines, running alongside him as he scored his first touchdown. This was a man deeply connected to his family, a man whose absence was a gaping wound in the lives of those he left behind. As the investigation broadened, the spotlight turned toward the estranged wife of the victim, a woman named Tia. The marriage had been troubled, characterized by a recent separation and financial instability, had forced the couple to move in with Tasha's father and brother. Money and infidelity had become the twin shadows looming over their relationship. Maurice found it difficult to locate Tasha initially, prompting him to pivot toward JR's phone records. The digital trail led to a man named Samuel Pillman, who had contacted JR twice on the evening of February 12. When Maurice attempted to reach Pillman, the man's decision to hang up the phone immediately raised a red flag. In the eyes of a detective, hanging up is an invitation for a face-to-face meeting. However, A second conversation with Pillman revealed a different story. He admitted that he had reached out to JR to purchase a small amount of marijuana for a birthday celebration. JR had a side hustle, a minor involvement in the drug trade that did nothing to diminish the tragedy of his murder. Pillman's story aligned perfectly with the phone records. A short call that went unanswered, suggesting that JR was already incapacitated or otherwise engaged by the time the second call was made. Pillman was cleared, and the focus returned to the steel mill where Tiash worked as a security guard. When the news of JR's death was finally broken to Tiash, her reaction was complex. She painted a picture of a marriage that had dissolved into a cycle of cheating and reconciliation. She claimed that on the night of February 20, JR had visited her around 10 o'clock in the evening to collect his belongings. She described a heated argument he supposedly had on the phone with another woman named Rosario. Tiash portrayed Rosario as a jealous, maniacal figure, a convenient scapegoat for the violence that had occurred. But the truth in a murder case is rarely found in the first story told. When Rosario came forward to speak with the investigators, she presented a starkly different narrative. She spoke of her love for JR and her fear of Tiash's volatile temper. She provided her phone to the detectives, allowing them to see a text and call history that contradicted Tiash's claims. It was Tiash who had been the source of the rage, Tiash who had been hurling threats and insults. Rosario was not a killer. She was a woman caught in the crossfire of a broken marriage. The investigation then turned toward the family of Tiash Ra. Her brother, Alex Ra Jr., and her father, Alex Ra Sr., were known to have a deep-seated animosity toward JR. The brother, in particular, viewed himself as his sister's protector. A breakthrough occurred when Maurice focused on the only physical evidence available, the speaker wire. It was a common item, yet its specific type was hard to find in local stores. A visit to the garage where Alex Ra Jr. worked revealed a significant detail. He was an audio installer who frequently handled speaker wire. Though the wire at the shop did not match the bindings perfectly, the circumstantial link was strengthening. The detectives decided it was time to move from the river to the room where they suspected the crime had taken place. A search warrant for the RRA residence on High Marker Street was executed. As the investigators walked into Tiash's bedroom, the anomalies were immediate. Sections of the wall-to-wall carpeting had been cut out and replaced at odd angles. When they peeled back the new carpet and the padding beneath, they found the subfloor saturated with a dark, unmistakable stain. A presumptive test confirmed the presence of blood. There was so much of it that it had seeped into the wood. High-velocity spatter on the walls told a story of blunt force trauma, of a struggle that had ended in a quiet room while the world outside slept. When confronted with the evidence of the blood in her bedroom, Tiash offered a desperate and implausible excuse: a nosebleed. Investigator Maurice, with a touch of grim irony, noted that one would need a fire hose up their nose to produce that much blood. The facade was crumbling. The theory was becoming clear. Tiash could not have carried out this act alone. Subduing a man of JR's size, binding him, and transporting a body required more than one set of hands. It was a family affair, a conspiracy of silence and violence. The final nails in the coffin of the Ruff family came from a witness named Andrew Johnson and the unblinking eye of a surveillance camera. Johnson reported that Alex Ra Jr. had asked for help moving furniture shortly after JR's disappearance. More importantly, GPS records and video footage from a local Walmart showed the father and son purchasing hydrogen peroxide at 2 o'clock in the morning on February 20. While many people shop late, fewer buy in large quantities of a cleaning agent known for its ability to erase the traces of blood. The reconstruction of the crime revealed a cold-blooded trap. Tiash had lured JR to the house with the promise of a candlelight dinner and a bath, a faint attempt at reconciliation. Instead of a romantic evening, JR walked into an ambush. He was attacked, overwhelmed by the Ra family, and bound with the very wire that would eventually identify his killers. They had hoped the Black River would carry their secret to the Atlantic Ocean, but the river gave up its dead, and the truth followed. In the halls of justice, the jury saw through the lies. Tiash and her brother, Alex Jr., were convicted of murder and sentenced to 37 years in prison each. The father, Alex Sr., was sentenced to 8 years for his role in the cleanup and the obstruction of justice. For Brittany Green and her children, the verdict was a moment of bittersweet release. JR was gone, and no sentence could bring him back to the sidelines of a football game or the end of a phone line at night. Yet, there was comfort in the knowledge that those responsible were facing the consequences of their behavior. Homicide investigation is the ultimate test of an investigator's skill and resolve. It is a reminder that good police work is the necessary answer to the complexities of the human condition. It serves as a warning that while violence may occur in the shadows, there are those who will spend their lives walking through the darkness to bring the light of justice. Leon Harrison Jr.'s story ended in a dark river, but his memory lives on in the hearts of his children and in the victory of the law over the chaos of cruelty. It is a quiet Saturday morning on March 11th. The air carries the scent of salt and ancient cypress trees. A local resident seeking the solace that only a morning of fishing can provide is out on the Black River. This river, with its dark, tea-colored waters, usually offers peace. However, as the fisherman casts his line, he notices an anomaly in the water. Something is floating, bobbing gently against the current. As he maneuvers his boat closer, the reality of the situation settles into a cold knot in his stomach. This is not debris. This is a human body. The call goes out, shattering the weekend stillness. Among those responding is investigator Alan Morris. In Georgetown, they use the title investigator rather than detective, a distinction that Maurice explains as being a generalist in the field of law enforcement. He handles everything from fraud and burglaries to bank robberies. A normal day in his life can transform into a chaotic one within seconds. For Maurice, this job is not just a profession, it is life itself. When the sheriff's office arrives at the riverbank around 1:30 in the afternoon, the recovery process begins. Law enforcement officers have to physically reach into the water, grasping the clothing of the individual to ease him toward the shore. At first glance, one might wonder if this was a tragic accident, perhaps someone who fell from a boat, but as the body is brought onto solid ground, the grim truth reveals itself to Alan Morris. This was no accident. The victim's wrists and ankles are bound tightly with speaker wire. To a seasoned eye, this is the unmistakable signature of a homicide. The discovery of a body in water presents an enormous challenge for any investigator. Water is a cruel element. It erases evidence and accelerates the process of decomposition. In the southern climate, even in February and March, the elements are unpredictable. The water temperature and the local wildlife, including alligators that prefer living prey but leave their mark, regardless, complicate the forensic analysis. The face of the victim is unrecognizable, leaving his identity a mystery in those initial hours. Investigator Alan Morris is primarily experienced in property crimes. If this is indeed a homicide, it will be his very first case of this magnitude. The weight of the responsibility is palpable. He attends the autopsy, an experience he describes as nerve-wracking and gruesome. Seeing a fellow human being bound hand and foot is, in his words, the most uncivilized way to leave this world. The medical examiner, while unable to pinpoint an exact cause of death due to the advanced state of decomposition, confirms the ruling of homicide based on the bindings. There are lacerations on the belly, though not deep enough to cause death by bleeding, and signs of potential blunt force trauma. However, a single identifying mark survives the river's attempt to hide the truth. On the inner right forearm of the victim is a tattoo of a rose. This detail connects the body to a missing person report filed 2 weeks earlier. The victim is Leon Harrison Jr., known affectionately to everyone as JR. He was 32 years old, a father, and a man with a big personality. The investigation shifts from a missing person case to a murder inquiry. Maurice begins by speaking with Brittany Green, the mother of the victim's 2 children. She describes JR as a funny, outgoing man who loved to smile and was a devoted father. His children remember him as joyful and active, the kind of father who would run down the sidelines cheering during a football game. JR had not missed a nightly call to his children in years, so when he vanished 2 weeks prior, Brittany knew something was terribly wrong. As Maurice digs deeper into the life of JR, he learns of a complicated web of relationships. JR had an estranged wife named Taisha. They had been married since September 2015, but the relationship was fraught with tension. Money problems had forced them to move in with Taisha's father and brother, and the marriage was eventually poisoned by allegations of infidelity on both sides. JR had moved out, but the two maintained an on-again, off-again connection. The investigation initially looks at Samuel Pillman, the last person to have contacted JR on the evening of February 25th. Pillman's behavior is suspicious. He hangs up on Maurice when first contacted. However, upon further questioning, Pillman admits he was trying to buy marijuana from JR for a birthday celebration. Phone records corroborate his story, showing a second call that went unanswered, suggesting JR had already met his fate, or was unable to respond. Pillman is cleared as a suspect. Attention turns back to the estranged wife Tia. When Maurice finally locates her at her job as a security guard at a steel mill, the same place JR used to work, she presents a story of a difficult marriage. She claims JR was cheating on her with a woman named Rosario, and describes a heated, jealous argument they supposedly had on the night he disappeared. According to T, JR came by her house at 10 o'clock that evening to pick up clothes and left while arguing with Rosario on the phone. Maurice, ever the professional, seeks out Rosario. Instead of a jealous killer, he finds a heartbroken woman who deeply loved JR. Rosario tells a completely different story. She claims it was Taish who was the source of the rage and harassment. She provides her phone records, which revealed that the angry phone calls and threats were coming from Taish, not the other way around. The text history confirms Rosario's account, shifting the psychological profile of the suspect squarely toward the Ra family. The investigator learns that the conflict was not limited to the husband and wife. Taisha's brother, Alex Ra Jr., and her father, Alex Ra Sr., harbored a deep resentment toward JR. They viewed him as a bad influence and a source of pain for Alex Jr., who worked at a garage installing car stereos, possessed a specific skill set. He worked with speaker wire. A search warrant is executed at the RA residence on High Market Street. Inside Taisha's bedroom, investigators find something highly unusual. Pieces of the wall-to-wall carpeting have been cut out and replaced at odd angles. When Morris peels back the carpet padding, he finds the subfloor saturated with blood. A presumptive test confirms it is human blood, despite the family's attempts to clean the scene. The sheer volume of blood suggests a life-threatening injury occurred in that room. When confronted with the evidence, Taish offers a weak explanation. She claims it was a nosebleed. Maurice, with a touch of grim irony, notes that one would need a fire hose for a nose to produce that much blood. Taish maintains her innocence, claiming she would never hurt her husband, but her narrative is crumbling under the weight of forensic reality. She eventually requests a lawyer and is allowed to leave, as the investigators do not yet have enough evidence for an arrest. The breakthrough comes from an unexpected witness named Andrew Johnson. He tells the police that shortly after JR went missing, Alex Ra Jr. asked for a ride to Myrtle Beach. During the trip, Alex Jr. was laughing and allegedly made comments about doing business. This witness testimony gives Maurice a new lead. He analyzes the global positioning system data from Alex Jr.'s phone, which confirms the trip and reveals another critical detail. At 2 o'clock in the morning on February 26, the night JR disappeared, the phone records place Alex Jr. and his father at a local Walmart. Investigators spend hours reviewing surveillance footage from the store. They find exactly what they are looking for. Alex Ra Sr. and Alex Ra Jr. are caught on camera purchasing hydrogen peroxide, a well-known agent for cleaning blood. There is no innocent reason for a father and son to be buying mass quantities of cleaning supplies at 2 in the morning while their relative's bedroom is soaked in blood. This discovery is the final piece of the puzzle. The Rowe family had acted together. Taish had lured JR to the house with the promise of a candlelight dinner and a reconciliation in the bathtub. It was a trap. Once inside the bedroom, JR was ambushed by the family. He was beaten and bound with the speaker wire provided by Alex Jr. He was then transported to the Black River and discarded, with the killers hoping the current would take him to the Atlantic Ocean to be forgotten forever. In the end, justice prevails. Taish Ra and Alex Ra Jr. are convicted of murder and sentenced to 37 years in prison. Alex Ra Sr. is sentenced to 8 years for obstruction of justice and his role in the cleanup. For Alan Morris, his first homicide case ends with a sense of accomplishment and a profound understanding of the human condition. He has provided the consequences for their behavior. The family of Leon Harrison Jr. continues to honor his memory. His children release balloons at the river where he was found and celebrate his birthday every year. Though the loss is heavy, the knowledge that those responsible are behind bars brings a semblance of peace. The case stands as a testament to the fact that while water can hide a body, it cannot wash away the truth when a dedicated investigator is on the trail. It was a Saturday morning on March 11, 2017, in the quiet town of Georgetown, South Carolina. The air carried the heavy, humid scent of the low country, a place where history and nature often intertwine in the shadows of cypress trees. A local resident was plying his hobby of fishing on the Black River, seeking the solace that only the steady flow of dark water can provide. However, the tranquility of the morning was shattered when he noticed something caught in the current that did not belong to the natural order of the river. He looked more closely, his heart hammering against his ribs, and he found himself incredibly alarmed. What he saw was a body floating in the Black River. For a seasoned investigator, This is the beginning of a grim marathon. Solving a murder takes a rare breed of individual who can look into the abyss and not blink. Someone who can solve the unsolvable and catch a ruthless killer to find justice for those who can no longer speak for themselves. This is the essence of being an American detective. In Georgetown, they call them investigators rather than detectives, a title that implies a broad responsibility. Investigator Alan Morris was one such man. He was a general investigator, accustomed to handling everything from fraud cases and burglaries to bank robberies. He knew all too well that a normal day could turn into a busy day really quickly. For men like Morris, this job is not just a career, it is life itself. The call came in at about 1:30 that afternoon. When Maurice arrived at the scene, law enforcement officers were already in the process of bringing the remains to the shore. It was a visceral task, requiring them to physically grab hold of the individual by his clothing and ease him back onto the land. At first glance, one might wonder if this was a tragic accident, perhaps someone who had fallen out of a boat or slipped into the treacherous currents. But as the body was brought fully to the shore, the reality of the situation became immediately evident to Morris. The victim's wrists and his ankles were bound tightly with speaker wire. This was no accident. It was a clear and chilling indication of a homicide. When a victim is found in the water, the complexity of the case increases tenfold. Water is a cruel element that does terrible things to human remains. It accelerates decomposition and complicates the task of determining a cause of death through simple observation. In the South, even in February and March, the elements can be tricky. The water plays a significant factor in the speed of decay, leaving the face of the deceased unrecognizable. Positive identification was impossible at that moment, but Maurice had a lead in the back of his mind. He recalled a missing person report filed by a woman named Brittany Green. Brittany Green had come to the police to report that the father of her 2 children, Leon Harrison Jr., whom everyone called JR, had vanished. Though they no longer lived together, JR was a man of routine and devotion, calling every single night to speak to his children. When 2 weeks passed without a word, Brittany knew something was deeply wrong. A man with a family, with loved ones, and with children does not simply vanish off the face of the earth without a reason. Brittany described JR as a 32-year-old, African-American male with a distinctive rose tattoo on his inner right forearm. This tattoo would become the silent witness Maurice needed. For investigator Maurice, this case represented a significant milestone. He had spent much of his time working property crimes, and if this was confirmed as a homicide, it would be his very first. The body was sent for an autopsy, an experience that Maurice found to be nerve-wracking and gruesome. The first autopsy is always a shock to the system, a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the capacity for human cruelty. Seeing a man bound hand and foot is perhaps the most uncivilized way to witness a person departing this world. The medical examiner explained that while the high level of decomposition made it difficult to pinpoint the exact cause of death, the presence of the bindings made the ruling of homicide undeniable. There were lacerations on the belly, but they were not deep enough to cause someone to bleed to death or to cause internal damage. In the dark waters of the Black River, animals and alligators are a constant presence, though alligators typically prefer live targets. The medical examiner suggested that blunt force trauma from a beating might have been involved, but the evidence was obscured by time and the elements. DNA and fingerprints were unlikely to have survived the immersion. Yet, the rose tattoo remained, identifying the body as Leon Harrison Jr. The missing person case was now officially a homicide investigation. Morris felt the weight of the responsibility. In the world of homicide investigation, there is an expression that you go from being the new guy to the old guy in about 30 minutes. He began by diving into the life of the victim. Brittany Green spoke of JR with affection, describing him as a funny, outgoing person with a big personality who loved to smile and tell jokes. To his children, he was a joyful and active father. His son remembered him as a man who would run down the sidelines of a football field, cheering with infectious enthusiasm when his son scored his first touchdown. JR was a man connected to his family, a man who checked on his children constantly. As the investigation deepened, Maurice looked for enemies or conflicts. Brittany mentioned that JR had an estranged wife named Taish. They had been married since September 2015, but the relationship had soured, and JR had recently moved out. He had expressed unhappiness in the marriage, which immediately raised a red flag for the investigators. Marital troubles are a classic motive in the world of crime, but at this stage, it was merely a thread to be pulled. Locating Taishra proved to be difficult at first. While searching for her, Maurice turned his attention to JR's phone records. On the evening of February 25th, JR had received 2 phone calls from a man named Samuel Pillman. Pillman appeared to be the last person to see JR alive. When Maurice attempted to contact Pillman at his workplace, and later at the Quality Inn where he lived, Pillman's behavior was suspicious. He hung up the phone as soon as Morris identified himself as a detective. In the mind of an investigator, hanging up on the police is a sure way to move to the top of the suspect list. However, when Maurice finally spoke to Pillman, a different story emerged. Pillman admitted that he had called JR to purchase some marijuana for a birthday celebration. JR had a side hustle selling grass, a fact that Morris viewed with professional detachment, regardless of his involvement with drugs. JR was a victim of murder, and his life held value. Pillman explained that JR had agreed to come to his room, but he never showed up. The phone records supported this, showing a second call from Pillman that lasted only 15 to 20 seconds because there was no answer. Pillman was dropped as a suspect, leaving Maurice to face the reality that he was already 2 weeks behind in a case where every second counted. Finally, Maurice located Tia Schroer at her job as a security guard at a steel mill. When they broke the news of her husband's death, they brought her to the police department for questioning. Taish initially painted a picture of a decent marriage that had eventually faltered due to money issues and mutual infidelity. They had moved in with her father and her brother, adding another layer of domestic tension. Taish claimed she had kicked JR out after discovering he was cheating, though they had maintained an on-and-off relationship. The last time she saw him, she claimed, was February 25th, at around 10 o'clock in the evening. He had come by to pick up some clothes. According to Taish, JR was on the phone with another woman named Rosario, and they were having a very heated argument. Taish portrayed Rosario as a maniacal, jealous woman who was out of control. This directed the investigative lens toward Rosario. When Rosario came forward to speak with the police, she presented a starkly different narrative. She spoke of her love for JR and her grief over his death. She explained that she hadn't reported him missing because she didn't want to interfere in his complicated life, assuming he was laying low due to the drama with his wife. Rosario claimed that it was Taish who was the source of the rage. She described how Taish had cheated multiple times and how JR had tried to fix the marriage to no avail. Regarding the supposed angry phone call on the night of the 25th, Rosario's account was revealing. She stated that she had never had an angry call with JR. Instead, she had received a call from JR's phone, but it was Taish on the other end, ranting, raving, and screaming threats. Rosario handed her phone over to the detectives, and a text history in logs confirmed her story. Rosario was not a killer. She was a woman whose heart had been broken. The focus shifted back to Taish Ra and her family. The psychological profile of the case began to take shape. This was not a crime committed in a vacuum. Rosario pointed out that Taish's brother, Alex Ra Jr., and her father, Alex Ra Sr., both harbored deep resentment toward JR. Alex Jr. saw himself as his sister's protector, and the family viewed JR as a negative influence. Maurice was now navigating a complex web of family loyalty and buried secrets. One piece of physical evidence remained paramount: the speaker wire used to bind the victim. Maurice searched local stores like Walmart, hoping to find a match for the specific type of wiring, but he found nothing. Then, a realization struck him. Alex Red Jr. worked at a garage where he installed He worked with speaker wire every day. When Maurice visited the garage, the manager confirmed Alex Jr.'s employment, but noted that specific wire used on JR did not match what they currently had in stock. It was a setback, but the connection was too coincidental to ignore. Without a crime scene of occurrence, Morris knew he had to find where the murder had taken place. The most likely location was the Ra household. Armed with circumstantial evidence, they obtained a search warrant for the house on High Market Street. As they searched the rooms, they found a disturbing sight in Taisha's bedroom. A section of the wall-to-wall carpeting had been cut out and replaced at odd angles. When the investigators pulled up the carpet and the padding, they discovered a large, dark stain on the side. A presumptive test confirmed it was blood. The amount of blood was staggering. It wasn't just a speck. It was a saturation that had soaked into the wood. They found high-velocity blood spatter on the walls, the kind that results from blunt force trauma. Something horrific had happened in that room. Forensic tests later confirmed that the blood belonged to Leon Harrison Jr. JR had met his end in his wife's bedroom. When confronted with the evidence, Taisha's response was a desperate lie. She claimed the massive amount of blood was from a nosebleed. Maurice countered that one would need a fire hose up their nose to produce that much blood. Taisha insisted she would never hurt her husband, but the evidence told a different story. However, a saturated subfloor and replaced carpet were still circumstantial. To secure a conviction, Maurice needed more. Justice arrived in the form of a witness named Andrew Johnson. He told the police that Alex Rao Jr. had asked him for a ride to Myrtle Beach to help a friend move furniture. Phone records and GPS data from Alex Jr.'s cell phone confirmed the trip. More importantly, the GPS data revealed that at 2 o'clock in the morning on February 20, the night of the murder, the family had gone to Walmart. Surveillance footage from Walmart provided the ultimate evidence. It showed Alex Rao Jr. and Alex Rao Sr. purchasing hydrogen peroxide, a well-known cleaning agent used to remove blood. In the dead of night, while the rest of the world slept, the father and son were preparing to scrub away the evidence of a life taken. This was the nail in the coffin for the Rao family. The investigators were finally able to piece together the tragic final moments of JR's life. Tayesh had lured him to the house with the promise of a candlelight dinner and a bath, a cruel trap designed to exploit his hope for reconciliation. When he entered the bedroom, he was ambushed. He was attacked, subdued, and bound with speaker wire by Tahish and her brother. The rage that had built up in the marriage exploded into a fatal beating. Afterward, the family worked together to clean the scene and transport the body to the Black River, hoping the current would carry their secret to the ocean. In court, the truth was laid bare. The jury found that the father, Alex Rao Sr., was involved in the cleanup and charged him with obstruction of justice. Tayesh Rao and Alex Rao Jr. were convicted of murder. The judge sentenced the siblings to 37 years in prison each, while the father received 8 years. For Brittany Green and her children, the verdict brought tears of relief in the beginning of a long journey toward healing. JR's son continues to feel his father's presence, especially on the football field, believing that his dad is still there beside him, cheering him on. Every year, the family releases balloons of the river to honor his memory. For investigator Alan Morris, his first homicide case will always be etched in his mind. It was a test of skill, patience, and the pursuit of truth. Good police work is the answer to the human condition, a reminder that while we cannot always prevent tragedy, we can ensure that those who commit such acts face the consequences of their behavior. In the end, justice was served for Leon Harrison Jr., a man who was much more than a victim found in a river. He was a father, a son, and a human being whose life mattered. It was a quiet Saturday morning on March 11, 2017, in the small town of Georgetown, South Carolina. The air held that peculiar dampness of early spring, and the Black River flowed with its usual deceptive tranquility. A local resident, seeking the solace of his weekend hobby, was fishing along the banks when he noticed an anomaly in the dark water. At first, it looked like debris, or perhaps a fallen log, but as the current nudged it closer, the fisherman realized with a jolt of pure alarm that he was looking at a human body. This was not a case of a tragic drowning or a boating accident. This was something far more sinister, the kind of discovery that changes a community forever. In the world of law enforcement, there is a rare breed of individuals who answer the call when the unthinkable happens. They are the ones who spend their careers closing murder cases, chasing ruthless killers, and seeking a final measure of justice for those who can no longer speak for themselves. In Georgetown, one such man was investigator Alan Morris. While some jurisdictions use the title of detective, here they are called investigators, perhaps because their work is so general. Maurice worked everything from fraud and burglaries to bank robberies. He was used to the ebb and flow of a normal day, but as any veteran knows, a normal day can turn into a frantic race against time in the blink of an eye. For Maurice, this job was not just a career, it was life itself. The call came in at approximately 1:30 that afternoon. The body had been discovered within the county jurisdiction, and the sheriff office responded immediately. When Maurice arrived at the scene, the recovery process was already underway. Officers had to physically reach into the water, grabbing hold of the individual by the clothing to ease the remains back to the shore. The initial questions were standard. Was this a fisherman who had slipped? A boater who had fallen overboard? However, as soon as the body was on solid ground, the accidental theory evaporated. The victim's wrists and ankles were bound tightly with speaker wire. To any investigator, this was the universal signature of a homicide. Finding a victim in the water enormously complicates a case. Nature is not kind to the human form in these conditions. Water does terrible things to evidence, washing away trace DNA and fingerprints that might otherwise lead straight to a killer. In the heat of the South, even in February and March, decomposition happens with terrifying speed. The face of the man recovered from the Black River was unrecognizable. his features lost to the elements and the passage of time. Positive identification was impossible at the shoreline, but Maurice already had a name echoing in the back of his mind. Not long before this discovery, a woman named Brittany Green had come to the station to report a missing person. The man she was looking for was Leon Harrison Jr., though everyone knew him simply as JR. He was the father of her 2 children. Although they no longer lived together, JR was a man of habit, especially when it came to his family. He called every single night to speak to his children. When 2 weeks passed without a single word, Brittany knew something was horribly wrong. A man with loved ones, a man with a big personality and a devotion to his kids, does not simply vanish off the face of the earth without a reason. Brittany described JR as a 32-year-old African-American male with a very specific identifying mark. He had a tattoo of a rose on his inner right forearm. For investigator Maurice, this was his first homicide case. He had spent years handling property crimes, but now he was stepping into the deep end of criminal investigation. The body was sent for an autopsy, an experience that remains etched in the mind of any investigator, especially the first one. It is a gruesome, clinical process that highlights the ultimate lack of civilization in a violent death. Seeing a man bound hand and foot is a stark reminder of the cruelty one human can inflict upon another. The medical examiner confirmed what Maurice already suspected. While the advanced state of decomposition made it difficult to pinpoint the exact cause of death, the presence of the bindings made the ruling of homicide undeniable. There were lacerations on the belly, but they were not deep enough to cause the victim to bleed to death, nor did they cause internal damage. It was possible they were the result of aquatic life or other environmental factors. The river was home to alligators, but as the experts noted, they generally prefer live targets. The medical examiner suggested that blunt force trauma from a beating might have been involved, but even that remained an educated guess. The most significant finding, however, was the rose tattoo on the right arm. The missing person file was officially closed, and the homicide investigation of Leon Harrison Jr. began. Maurice was feeling the pressure. In the world of homicide, you go from being the new guy to the old guy in about 30 minutes. He started by gathering as much information as possible about the victim. Brittany Green spoke of JR with warmth, describing him as a funny, outgoing person with a joyful soul. He was the kind of father who would run down the sidelines of a football field, cheering his son on until they met in the end zone. He was connected to his children by an unbreakable bond. The investigators asked the standard but necessary questions. Did he have enemies? Were there conflicts in his life? Brittany pointed toward one specific source of tension: his estranged wife, Taisha. JR and Taesh had married in September of 2015, but the relationship had been far from happy. JR had confided in Brittany that he was miserable and that money was a constant source of trouble. The couple had been forced to move in with Taish's father and brother, a living arrangement that rarely fosters marital bliss. Both JR and Taish had reportedly struggled with issues of infidelity, creating a cycle of on-again, off-again drama. For an investigator, recent marital troubles are always a point of interest. It might be nothing, or it might be everything. Maurice set out to find Taish, but she proved difficult to locate at first. Turning his attention to JR phone records, he found that on the evening of February 25th, the victim had received 2 calls from a man named Samuel Pillman. This was a potential lead, perhaps the last person to see JR alive. When Morris tracked Pillman down to a local hotel, the man reacted with suspicious hostility, hanging up as soon as the investigator identified himself. In the mind of a detective, hanging up is an invitation for a face-to-face meeting. When they finally spoke, Pillman offered an explanation that was both simple and common. He wanted to buy some marijuana from JR to celebrate a birthday with a roommate. JR had a small side hustle selling grass, a fact that did not change the tragedy of his death in the eyes of investigator Maurice. A victim is a victim, regardless of their lifestyle. Pillman claimed that JR never showed up for the meeting. The phone records supported this, showing a second call from Pillman that lasted only 15 to 20 seconds, likely an unanswered attempt to find out where the dealer was. Samuel Pillman was dropped as a suspect, leaving Maurice back at square one, 2 weeks behind the trail. The investigator finally caught up with Taishra at her job. She worked as a security guard at a steel mill, the same place where JR had also worked. When they broke the news of her husband's death, she was brought to the police department for questioning. Her story was a shifting landscape. At first, she painted a picture of a good marriage, but then the cracks appeared. She spoke of the money problems and the infidelity. She claimed she had kicked JR out after discovering he was cheating, yet they continued to see each other sporadically. Taish claimed the last time she saw her husband was on the night of February 25th, around 10 o'clock. He had come by to pick up some clothes. According to her, he was on his phone the entire time, engaged in a heated, screaming argument with another woman she identified as Rosario. Taish painted Rosario as a maniacal, jealous woman who was out of control. It was a classic tactic: deflect the suspicion onto a rival. If Rosario was the one consumed by rage, then Rosario was the one capable of murder. However, when Rosario heard the news, she came forward on her own. She spoke of a deep, desperate love for JR, and explained that she had not reported him missing because she did not want to interfere with his life or his complicated marriage. She offered a completely different perspective on the relationship between JR and T. According to Rosario, Taish was the one who cheated multiple times, and JR was the one constantly trying to fix a broken situation. The most critical piece of information Rosario provided was about the supposed angry phone call on the night of the 25th. She claimed she never had a fight with JR that night. Instead, she received a call from JR's phone, but it was Taish on the other end, ranting, raving, and cussing her out for being the other woman. Rosario handed her phone over to the investigators, and the text and call history confirmed her version of events perfectly. The jealous rage factor was not with Rosario. It was sitting right in front of them in the person of Taish Ra. The investigation then expanded to the rest of the Rowe family. Rosario mentioned that JR did not get along with Taish, brother, Alex Ra Jr., or her father, Alex Ra Sr. The brother saw himself as his sister's bodyguard, and the father harbored a deep-seated dislike for JR, viewing him as a bad influence. Maurice was now navigating an extremely complicated web of family loyalty and hidden resentment. He knew that the only physical evidence he had was the speaker wire. In a town like Georgetown, there are many places to buy such a thing. Maurice checked local stores like Walmart, hoping to find a match for the specific wire used to bind JR. When those efforts failed, a bell went off in his brain. Alex Ra Jr. worked at a garage where he installed car stereos. It was a job that required the constant use of speaker wire. Although the specific wire at the garage did not match the bindings, the connection was too strong to ignore. Maurice knew he had no crime scene yet. The body had been found in the river, but where had the life been taken? The likely scenario was the RA household. Armed with enough circumstantial evidence to secure a search warrant, the investigators descended on the house on High Market Street. Taish, her father, and her brother were ordered to wait outside, while the team moved in with cameras and forensic kits. They were looking for anything: cutting tools, more wire, or traces of blood. When they entered Taish's bedroom, they noticed something immediately suspicious. The wall-to-wall carpeting had been tampered with. Pieces of the carpet had been cut out and replaced at odd angles and corners. When they pulled up the replacement carpet and the padding beneath it, they found exactly what they were looking for. The subfloor was saturated with a dark stain. A presumptive test confirmed it was blood. As they processed the room, they found more evidence of a violent struggle. There was high-velocity blood spatter on the walls, the kind of pattern that results from blunt force trauma, from a repeated and vicious beating. Something terrible had happened in that room, and the amount of blood suggested a life-threatening injury. Taish was brought in for questioning again. When confronted with the photos of the blood-soaked subfloor, she offered a dismissive explanation. She claimed it was just a nosebleed. Morris was not buying it. "You could have a fire hose up your nose, and you would not produce that much blood," he told her. Despite the evidence, they did not yet have enough for an arrest. Taish invoked her right to a lawyer and was allowed to leave. For an investigator, knowing the truth and proving it to a jury are two very different things. The break in the case came from an unexpected source. A man named Andrew Johnson came forward with a story that would shatter the Rowe family defense. He told the police that shortly after JR went missing, Alex Ra Jr. had asked him for a ride to Myrtle Beach to help a friend move furniture. During that ride, Alex Jr. had been laughing and bragging, telling Johnson that they had done business. To an investigator, this was a clear admission of a crime. The police used GPS data from Alex Jr.'s cell phone to confirm that the trip to Myrtle Beach had indeed occurred. But the digital trail revealed something even more damning. At 2 o'clock in the morning on February 26th, the night JR likely died, Alex Jr.'s cell phone was located at a local Walmart. The investigators spent hours poring over surveillance footage from the store. They finally found what they were looking for. On the tape, they saw Alex Ra Jr. and his father, Alex Ra Sr., purchasing hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is a well-known cleaning agent for removing blood. There are very few reasons for a father and son to be at Walmart at 2 in the morning buying large quantities of it, especially when their daughter and sister bedroom was covered in blood. This was the ultimate nail in the coffin. The investigation had painted a clear and horrifying picture of what happened on the night of February 20. Taish had lured JR to the house with the promise of a reconciliation. Text messages revealed a conversation about a candlelight dinner in the bathtub, a trap designed to make him feel safe and welcome. When JR entered the bedroom, he was not met with love, but with a coordinated ambush. He was attacked, subdued, and overwhelmed by Taish and her brother. They used speaker wire to bind his hands and feet, rendering him helpless before delivering the beating that ended his life. The father, Alex Sr., had then stepped in to help with the gruesome task of cleaning up the scene and disposing of the body. They had driven JR to the Black River and tossed him in, hoping the current would carry him to the Atlantic Ocean where he would be forgotten. In the end, justice was served. A jury determined that, while the father was involved in the cleanup and charged him with obstruction of justice, Taish and Alex Jr. were the primary killers. They were convicted of murder. The judge sentenced Taish and Alex Jr. to 37 years in prison, each, while Alex Sr. received a sentence of 8 years. For investigator Alan Morris, his first homicide case was a baptism by fire, a testament to the fact that good police work is the ultimate answer to the darker side of the human condition. For Brittany Green and her children, the verdict brought tears of relief. While nothing could bring JR back, they finally had the truth. JR was remembered as a hands-on father who loved his kids with everything he had. Every year, his family returns to the river to release balloons in his memory or visits his favorite restaurant. They carry the pain of his loss, but they also carry the knowledge that those responsible were held to account. Homicide investigation is the ultimate test of an investigator's skill, a reminder that while the law cannot prevent every tragedy, it ensures that there are consequences for behavior. We are the consequences, Maurice would say, and in Georgetown, those consequences were 37 years long. It was a Saturday morning, the 11th of March, in the year 2017, in the quiet town of Georgetown, South Carolina. The air carried the scent of the coast and the slow, rhythmic pulse of the Black River. For one local resident, it was supposed to be a morning of peace, a time to ply his hobby of fishing in the dark, tea-colored waters that had flowed through this county for generations. But as he looked out across the surface, he noticed something that did not belong to the natural order of the river. It was an anomaly, a shape that shifted with the current, and as he drew closer, the peace of the morning was shattered by an incredible alarm. What he had found was a body, floating silently in the Black River. This discovery would set in motion a journey into the darkest corners of human jealousy and the brightest efforts of those sworn to protect the living and find justice for the dead. In the world of law enforcement, there are those who spend their entire careers closing murder cases, answering a call that requires a rare breed of individual. It takes someone capable of solving the unsolvable and catching a ruthless killer to ensure that the dead are not forgotten. This is the essence of being an American detective. In Georgetown, the title used is investigator. Alan Morris, a man who had spent his time handling everything from fraud cases and burglaries to bank robberies, found himself as the primary investigator on a call that would change his career forever. He was a general investigator, a role where one never truly knows what the day will bring. A normal morning can turn into a frantic search for truth in the blink of an eye. For Maurice, this job was more than a profession. It was life. The call came in at approximately 1:30 that afternoon. The body had been discovered within the jurisdiction of the county, and the sheriff's office responded immediately. When Maurice arrived at the scene, the recovery process was already underway. Officers had to physically reach into the water, grabbing hold of the individual by his clothing to ease him back to the shore. At first, there were questions. Was this a tragic accident? A boater who had fallen overboard? A swimmer overcome by the current? But as the body reached the muddy bank, the reality of the situation became chillingly clear. This was no accident. The victim's wrists and ankles were bound tightly with speaker wire. To an investigator like Morris, this was the unmistakable signature of a homicide. The presence of bindings meant that someone had intended for this person to be helpless. However, finding a victim in the water introduces an enormous level of complexity. Water is an unforgiving element that does terrible things to the human form. Even in the months of February and March, the southern climate can accelerate decomposition, making the face unrecognizable and fingerprints nearly impossible to recover. At that moment, positive identification could not be made, but Morris's mind was already racing. He recalled a missing person report filed recently by a woman named Brittany Green. She had come in to report that the father of her 2 children, Leon Harrison Jr., known to everyone as JR, had vanished. JR was 32 years old, an African-American male with a vibrant personality. Though he and Brittany no longer lived together, he was a devoted father who called every single night to speak to his children. When 2 weeks passed without a single phone call, Brittany knew in her heart that something was terribly wrong. JR was not the kind of man to simply vanish off the face of the earth. He had roots, he had family, and most importantly, he had children who were the center of his world. Brittany provided a crucial detail to the police. JR had a rose tattooed on his inner right forearm. This single piece of information would become the key to identifying the silent figure pulled from the Black River. For investigator Maurice, this was a significant turning point. While he was experienced in property crimes, this would be his very first homicide investigation. The weight of the responsibility was heavy. He attended the autopsy, an experience he described as nerve-wracking and gruesome. To see a human being bound hand and foot, discarded like trash in a river, was, in his words, the most uncivilized way to leave this world. The medical examiner faced a difficult task. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, a definitive cause of death was hard to pinpoint. There were lacerations on the belly, but they were not deep enough to cause someone to bleed to death or to create internal damage. The river was home to many creatures, including alligators, though they typically preferred live targets. The examiner suggested that blunt force trauma might have played a role, but the water had washed away the trace evidence that often leads to a killer. DNA and fingerprints were gone. However, the autopsy yielded one vital truth. The rose tattoo on the right arm confirmed that the body was indeed Leon Harrison Jr. The case was officially retitled from a missing person to a homicide. In the world of investigation, there is a saying that you go from being the new guy to the old guy in about 30 minutes when you are handed a murder case. Maurice was nervous, but his resolve was ironclad. He began by returning to Brittany Green to learn more about the man JR was. She spoke of a funny, outgoing person with a big personality, a man who loved to smile and tell jokes. His son remembered him as a joyful and active father, a man who would run down the sidelines of a football field cheering with such intensity that he would meet his son in the end zone after a touchdown. This was a man worth fighting for. When asked about potential enemies, Brittany mentioned only one significant conflict. JR had an estranged wife named Taish. They had married in September of 2015, but the relationship had soured quickly. JR had expressed his unhappiness to Brittany, noting that the marriage was failing. This lead was the first spark in the investigation. A man with recent marital troubles is always a point of interest for a detective. Locating Taishra proved to be a challenge at first. While Maurice waited for a lead on her whereabouts, he turned his attention to JR's phone records. He found that on the evening of February 25th, JR had received 2 calls from a man named Samuel Pillman became a person of interest immediately. When Maurice attempted to contact him at his place of residence, the Quality Inn, Pillman answered his cell phone but hung up the moment Maurice identified himself as a detective. In the mind of a detective, hanging up the phone is almost an invitation to a face-to-face meeting. It suggests guilt or, at the very least, something to hide. When Maurice finally got Pillman back on the line, he took a different approach, explaining the gravity of the situation. Pillman eventually admitted that he had called JR to buy some marijuana for a birthday celebration. He claimed that JR agreed to meet him but never showed up. The phone records supported this. The second call was very short, indicating that JR had not answered. With the digital evidence aligning with his story, Pillman was dropped as a suspect. Maurice then focused back on Taishra. He eventually found her working as a security guard at a local steel mill, the same place where JR had once worked. When the investigators broke the news of her husband's death, Taish was brought to the police department for questioning. Her story was a complex web of contradictions. She initially claimed their marriage was fine, then admitted it was troubled. They had moved in with her father, Alex Ra Sr., and her brother, Alex Ra Jr., because of financial problems. She spoke of mutual infidelity and claimed she had kicked JR out after discovering his cheating. Taish claimed the last time she saw JR was the night of February 25th. She alleged that he came by to pick up clothes and was on the phone with another woman named Rosario. According to Taish, Rosario was a maniacal, jealous woman who was screaming so loudly that Taish could hear her through the phone. This painted Rosario as a potential suspect, a woman driven by out-of-control rage. However, When Rosario came forward to speak with the police, a very different picture emerged. Rosario was not a woman of rage, but a woman of heartbreak. She loved JR deeply and explained that their relationship was a sanctuary from his volatile marriage. She told the investigators that Tahish was the one who was unfaithful, and that Taisha's family hated JR. When the detectives checked Rosario's phone, they found the truth. There was no angry call from Rosario to JR. Instead, there was a record of Tahish calling Rosario from JR's phone, screaming insults and threats. The psychological profile began to shift. It was not the girlfriend who was the source of the rage, it was the estranged wife. Rosario also provided a crucial piece of information about the Rowe family dynamics. She explained that Taisha's brother, Alex Jr., acted as her bodyguard, and that her father, Alex Sr., harbored a deep animosity toward JR. Maurice was now looking at a family affair. He knew that one of the only pieces of physical evidence he had was the speaker wire used to bind JR. He began a meticulous search of local stores, including Walmart, to find a match for that specific wire. When that failed, he turned his attention to Alex Rowe Jr., who worked at an auto garage and frequently installed car stereos. This was a significant lead, as car stereo installation requires the exact type of wire found on the victim. Although the wire at the shop did not match perfectly, the connection was too strong to ignore. The investigation led Maurice to believe that JR had been killed inside the Rowe household on High Marcus Street. He obtained a search warrant for the home. Inside Taishi's bedroom, the investigators found something highly suspicious. Pieces of the wall-to-wall carpeting had been cut out and replaced at odd angles. When they pulled up the new inserts and the padding beneath, they found a massive saturation of blood on the sub. The scene was telling. There was high-velocity blood spatter on the walls, the kind of pattern that results from blunt force trauma or a violent beating. The sheer volume of blood indicated a life-threatening injury. When confronted with this evidence, Taish offered a weak and almost insulting explanation. She claimed it was a nosebleed. Maurice, with a touch of grim irony, noted that one would need a fire hose up their nose to produce that much blood. Despite the blood, they lacked enough evidence for an immediate arrest. Taish invoked her right to a lawyer and was allowed to leave. But the investigators did not give up. A witness named Andrew Johnson came forward, stating that Alex Rod Jr. had asked for a ride to Myrtle Beach shortly after JR went missing. GPS data from Alex Jr.'s phone confirmed the trip. More importantly, the data showed that, at 2 o'clock in the morning on February 26, the night of the murder, Alex Jr. and his father, Alex Sr., had gone to a local Walmart. Surveillance footage from the store captured the two men purchasing large quantities of hydrogen peroxide. To a criminal psychologist or a seasoned detective, this is a glaring red flag. Hydrogen peroxide is a well-known cleaning agent for removing blood. The image of a father and son shopping for cleaning supplies in the middle of the night, after a man has disappeared, was the final piece of the puzzle. It was the nail in the coffin for the Rowe family's lies. The reconstruction of the crime revealed a chilling betrayal. Taish had lured JR to the house with the promise of a candlelight dinner and a reconciliation. JR, wanting to believe in the best of his wife, walked into a trap. Once inside the bedroom, he was ambushed by Tahish and her brother. He was beaten, subdued, and bound with speaker wire, rendered completely helpless before his life was taken. The family then worked together to clean the scene and dump his body in the Black River, hoping the current would carry their secret to the Atlantic Ocean. In the end, justice was served. The jury saw through the deception. Taish Rah and Alex Rah Jr. were convicted of murder and sentenced to 37 years in prison. Alex Rah Sr., for his role in the cleanup and his attempt to thwart the investigation, was sentenced to 8 years for obstruction of justice. The story of Leon Harrison Jr. is a tragic reminder of how jealousy and hate can destroy lives, but it is also a testament to the dedication of investigators like Alan Morris. For JR's children, the loss is a wound that may never fully heal. They release balloons at the river every year to honor the father who cheered them on from the sidelines. But they also know that their father was not forgotten. The consequences for the behavior of the Ray family were delivered by the hands of a detective who refused to let a normal day stay normal until the truth was found. Good police work is indeed the answer to the human condition, ensuring that even when the river tries to hide a crime, the light of justice will eventually find its way to the surface. The morning of Saturday, March 11, 2017 in Georgetown, South Carolina began with the deceptive stillness that often precedes a grim revelation. A local resident was engaged in the quiet pursuit of fishing on the Black River, a pastime that usually offers nothing more than the rhythmic sound of water against wood and the hope of a catch. However, on this particular morning, the fisherman noticed something floating in the current that defied the natural order of the river. As he steered closer, his alarm grew into a chilling realization. This was not debris or an animal. It was a human body drifting aimlessly in the dark waters of the Black River. I have spent my entire career closing murder cases, but I am never the only one who answers such a call. It takes a rare breed of individual to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, and to find justice for those who can no longer speak for themselves. That is the fundamental requirement of being an American detective. In this jurisdiction, the title is investigator. Alan Morris is the man who stepped into this role. He describes himself as a general investigator, working everything from fraud and burglaries to bank robberies. In a small county, a normal day can transform into a life-altering crisis in a matter of minutes. For Maurice, this job is more than a profession, it is life itself. The body was discovered within the county jurisdiction, which prompted the sheriff's office to respond immediately. The call came in at approximately 1:30 that afternoon. When Morris arrived on the scene, the recovery process was already underway. Law enforcement officers had to physically reach into the water, grasping the individual's clothing to ease the remains back to the shore. At that moment, the primary question was whether this was an accidental drowning or a boating mishap. However, as soon as the body reached the bank, the truth became evident. The victim's wrists and ankles were bound tightly with speaker wire. To an experienced eye like that of Maurice, this was the unmistakable signature of a homicide. Finding a victim in the water enormously complicates any investigation. Water is a destructive force that ravages human tissue and erases delicate evidence. The elements in the South, even in February and March, can be unpredictable, and the water temperature significantly affects the speed of decomposition. By the time this individual was found, the face was completely unrecognizable, making positive identification impossible at the scene. Despite the gruesome condition of the remains, Maurice found his thoughts returning to a missing person case he had been monitoring. A woman named Brittany Green had recently reported the father of her 2 children missing. His name was Leon Harrison Jr., though everyone called him Jay. According to Brittany, JR was 32 years old and a devoted father who called his children every single night. When those calls ceased for 2 weeks, she knew something was terribly wrong. She explained to the police that men with families and loved ones do not simply vanish off the earth without a cause. Crucially, she mentioned a specific identifying mark, a rose tattooed on his inner right forearm. As Maurice prepared for the autopsy, he was acutely aware that this would be his very first homicide case. For a seasoned detective, an autopsy is a clinical necessity, but for the new guy, it is a profound shock to the system. The sight of a human being bound hand and foot in such an uncivilized manner is a reminder of the darkness some people carry in their hearts. The medical examiner could not determine the exact cause of death due to the advanced state of decomposition, but the bindings alone were enough to classify the case as a homicide. There were lacerations on the belly, but they were not deep enough to cause a person to bleed to death or to damage internal organs. The presence of wildlife in the river, including alligators, added another layer of complexity. It was difficult to distinguish between pre-mortem injuries and post-mortem animal activity. In the water, trace evidence like DNA or fingerprints rarely survives. The investigation was starting from zero, with one major exception. The rose tattoo on the right arm confirmed that the body was indeed Leon Harrison Jr. The missing person file was officially closed, and a murder investigation began. Maurice began his work by delving into the life of the victim. Brittany Green described JR as a funny, outgoing person with a big personality who loved to smile and tell jokes. His children remembered him as a joyful and active father who would run down the sidelines of a football field cheering for his son. However, the investigation soon revealed a more complicated personal life. JR had an estranged wife named Taish. They had married in September of 2015. Relationship had been plagued by unhappiness and financial strain. They had even been forced to move in with her father and brother. Brittany Green noted that JR had been unhappy and that the couple had recently broken up. When an investigator finds a dead man with recent marital troubles, the spouse naturally becomes a person of interest. However, locating Taish Rue proved difficult at first. While searching for her, Maurice turned his attention to JR's phone records. On the evening of February 25th, 2 phone calls were made to JR by a man named Samuel Pillman. Pillman became a potential last person to see the victim alive. When Maurice attempted to contact him at his workplace, and later at the Quality Inn, Pillman hung up the phone as soon as the investigator identified himself. In the world of criminal investigation, hanging up on a detective is a quick way to become a prime suspect. When Maurice finally managed to speak with Pillman, the man explained that he had called JR to purchase a small amount of marijuana for a birthday celebration. JR had a side hustle selling grass, which Morris viewed as irrelevant to the fact that the man had been murdered. Pillman claimed that during the first call, JR agreed to come to the hotel but never showed up. The second call went unanswered. The phone records corroborated this story, showing a very short duration for the second call, consistent with a call that was never picked up. With no evidence to link him to the crime, Pillman was dropped as a suspect. The pressure on Maurice was mounting, as he was already 2 weeks behind the trail of the killers. He finally located Taish Ra at a local steel mill where she worked as a security guard, a job JR had also held. When the investigators broke the news of her husband's death, she was brought to the police department for questioning. Initially, she portrayed the marriage as stable but eventually admitted to issues of infidelity and money problems. She claimed she had kicked JR out after discovering his cheating, but they had maintained an on-again, off-again relationship. She stated that the last time she saw him was the evening of February 25th, when he came by to pick up clothes. Taish pointed the finger at another woman named Rosario, whom she described as a maniacal and jealous individual. She claimed that JR and Rosario had a heated argument on the phone that night, which she could hear clearly. This moved the investigators' focus toward Rosario. However, when Rosario came forward, she presented a completely different narrative. She spoke of her deep love for JR and explained that she had not reported him missing because she did not want to interfere in his complicated domestic situation. She denied having an angry phone call with JR that night. Instead, she claimed that Taish had called her from JR's phone, ranting and raving with threats. Rosario provided her phone to the detectives, and the text history and call logs perfectly matched her version of events. It became clear that Rosario was not the killer, but a grieving woman. The person truly possessed by jealous rage was Taishra. This shifted the investigation back to the Ra family. Rosario also mentioned that Taisha's brother Alex Ra Jr. and their father Alex Ra Sr. both harbored a deep hatred for JR. Alex Jr. saw himself as his sister's protector, and both men viewed JR as a negative influence. Maurice was now looking at a complex web of family loyalty and resentment. The only physical evidence from the recovery of the body was the speaker wire used to bind JR. Morris searched local stores like Walmart for matching wire but found no leads. Then a realization struck him. Alex Ra Jr. worked at a garage where he installed car stereos, an occupation that involved constant use of speaker wire. Maurice visited the garage, but the wire found there did not match the specific type used on the victim. Despite this dead end, the suspicion remained that something terrible had happened inside the Rowe household. Equipped with a search warrant, investigators entered the home on High Market Street. While the family waited outside, Morris and his team processed the house. In Taisha's bedroom, they noticed something highly suspicious. Portions of the wall-to-wall carpeting had been cut out and replaced at odd angles. When they pulled up the carpet and the padding, they discovered a massive blood stain on the sub. A presumptive test confirmed it was human blood. The sheer volume of blood suggested a life-threatening injury. There was also high-velocity spatter on the walls, indicating a violent struggle or a beating with a blunt object. Forensic tests later confirmed the blood belonged to Leon Harrison Jr. When confronted with the evidence of the blood in her bedroom, Taish Ra offered a weak explanation, claiming it was merely a nosebleed. Maurice countered that no nosebleed could produce such a staggering amount of saturation. Despite the evidence, Taish maintained her innocence and eventually requested a lawyer. At that point, without enough probable cause for an arrest, she was allowed to leave. The investigation hit a plateau until a witness named Andrew Johnson came forward. Johnson reported that after JR went missing, Alex Ra Jr. had asked for a ride to Myrtle Beach. During that trip, Alex Jr. had supposedly confessed or made incriminating statements about the situation. Investigators used GPS data from Alex Jr.'s cell phone to confirm that the trip to Myrtle Beach had indeed occurred exactly when Johnson claimed. More importantly, the digital trail revealed that at 2 o'clock in the morning on February 26, the night of the murder, Alex Jr. had gone to a local Walmart. Surveillance footage from the store showed both Alex Jr. and his father Alex Sr. purchasing large quantities of hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is a well-known agent for cleaning blood. This was the ultimate piece of evidence. Innocent people do not buy cleaning supplies in the middle of the night to scrub away a massive volume of blood in a bedroom. The pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place. The investigators theorized that Taish Ra had lured JR to the house with the promise of a romantic reconciliation. She had sent him text messages about a candlelight dinner and a bath. When JR entered the bedroom, expecting a peaceful night, he was instead met by a deadly trap. He was ambushed by Taisha and her brother Alex Jr. They overwhelmed him, bound his hands and feet with speaker wire to make him helpless, and beat him until he died. The father, Alex Sr., then assisted in the effort to clean the crime scene and dispose of the body. They transported the remains to the Black River and threw him, in hoping the current would carry the secret out to the Atlantic Ocean. In the ensuing legal proceedings, the jury found that the father was primarily involved in the cleanup and charged him with obstruction of justice. Ty Shra and Alex Shra Jr. were convicted of murder. The judge sentenced the siblings to 37 years in prison each, while the father received a sentence of 8 years. For Alan Morris, his first homicide case ended with the successful delivery of justice. The conviction brought a sense of closure to Brittany Green and her children, who continued to honor J's memory by releasing balloons at the river and celebrating his life. This case serves as a profound reminder that while good police work cannot prevent the darkness of the human condition, it ensures that those who commit such acts face the consequences of their behavior. The investigation began with a fisherman on a quiet Saturday morning and ended with a family behind bars, proving that no matter how deep the water or how dark the night, the truth has a way of rising to the surface. Justice for Leon Harrison Jr. was hard-won, but it stands as a testament to the dedication of those who answered the call to serve and protect. It was a Saturday morning, the 11th of March, in the year 2017, within the quiet confines of Georgetown, South Carolina. The air held that peculiar dampness of early spring, where the warmth begins to battle the lingering chill of winter. A local resident was out on the Black River, engaging in the timeless and peaceful hobby of fishing. The river usually offered a sanctuary of silence, broken only by the ripple of water against the boat or the occasional call of a bird. However, on this specific morning, the fisherman noticed something floating in the water that did not belong to the natural landscape. It was an object that looked wrong, a shape that defied the usual debris of the river. As he steered closer, his heart began to race. What he saw was a body, and the alarm he felt in that moment would soon ripple through the entire community. This was a body floating in the Black River, a grim discovery that marked the beginning of a complex journey toward justice. Throughout a career dedicated to closing murder cases, one learns that it takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, and to find justice for those who can no longer speak for themselves. This is the weight and the reality of being an American detective. In this jurisdiction, they often use the title of investigator. Alan Morris, a general investigator for the local sheriff's office, was the man who answered the call. Maurice was a man accustomed to the variety of the job, working everything from fraud cases and burglaries to bank robberies. He understood that in law enforcement, a normal day can transform into a frantic, life-altering investigation in the blink of an eye. Truly, and really, this job is life, and on this day, life was about to confront a very dark side of human nature. The body was discovered within the county jurisdiction, and the call reached the sheriff's office at approximately 1:30 that afternoon. When investigator Maurice arrived at the scene, the recovery process was already underway. Officers had to physically reach into the water, grabbing hold of the individual by his clothing to ease him back toward the shore. At first, there were the usual questions that haunt a discovery like this. Was this a tragic accident? Had someone fallen out of a boat or slipped into the currents? But as the body reached the muddy bank, the truth became immediately and painfully evident. The victim's wrists and ankles were bound tightly with speaker wire. This was no accident. This was a clear, calculated indication of homicide. When a victim is found floating in water, the investigative challenges multiply exponentially. Water is a cruel environment for forensic evidence. It does terrible things to human remains, accelerating decomposition and washing away the delicate traces that might lead to a killer. In the southern climate, even in February and March, the elements are unpredictable. The water temperature and the biological activity in the river can render a face unrecognizable in a short amount of time. At that initial stage, positive identification was impossible by sight alone. However, Maurice had a lead already brewing in his mind. A missing person report had been filed recently by a woman named Brittany Green. Brittany Green had come to the police to report that the father of her 2 children, Leon Harrison Jr., known to everyone as JR, had vanished. Though they no longer lived together, JR was a man of habit. When it came to his children, he called every single night to speak with them. When those calls stopped for 2 weeks, Brittany knew something was deeply wrong. A man with a family, with loved ones, with children who adore him, does not simply vanish off the face of the earth without a trace. Brittany described JR as a 32-year-old, African-American male with a very specific, identifying mark, a rose tattooed on his inner right forearm. Investigator Maurice was primarily a property crimes investigator. If this discovery turned out to be JR, it would mark his very first homicide case. The transition from property crimes to a murder investigation is a baptism by fire. The body was sent for an autopsy, an event that Maurice remembers as a nerve-wracking experience. For seasoned detectives who have seen hundreds of autopsies, the process can become clinical, but the first one is always a shock to the system. Seeing a human being in that condition, bound hand and foot, is a reminder of the most uncivilized ways a person can be forced out of this world. The medical examiner faced a difficult task. Due to the advanced level of decomposition, the specific cause of death was hard to determine. There were lacerations on the belly, but they were not deep enough to cause exsanguination, which is the medical term for bleeding to death. They had not caused significant internal damage. It was difficult to tell if the wounds were part of the assault or caused by animals in the river after death. While alligators inhabit the Black River, they typically prefer live targets. The medical examiner suggested that blunt force trauma from a beating might have been the cause, but without definitive proof, the findings remain somewhat in such cases, DNA and fingerprints rarely survive the long immersion in water. However, the autopsy did yield one vital piece of information. The rose tattoo on the right arm was still visible. This confirmed the identity of the body as Leon Harrison Jr. The missing person file was officially retitled as a homicide. There is an old saying in the world of detectives that you go from being the new guy to the old guy in about 30 minutes once a murder case hits your desk. Maurice was nervous and worried, but those were the right emotions to have. It meant he understood the gravity of the situation. He began his investigation by returning to Brittany Green to learn more about JR as a person. She described him as a funny, outgoing man with a big personality. He was a man who loved to smile and tell jokes, but most importantly, he was a loving and caring father. His son remembered him as a joyful and active dad who would cheer loudly at football games, meeting him in the end zone after his first touchdown. He was deeply connected to his children. When asked about potential enemies or issues in JR's life, Brittany mentioned his estranged wife to he. They had been married since September of 2015, but the relationship had soured. JR had moved out because he was unhappy, and he often talked to Brittany about the troubles they were facing. This provided the investigators with their first person of interest. Marital troubles are a common thread in many homicides, but at this stage, it was merely a lead that needed to be followed. Locating Taishra proved to be a challenge at first. While Morris waited to find her, he turned his attention to JR's phone records. He found that on the evening of February 25th, JR had received 2 phone calls from a man named Samuel Pillman. Pillman could potentially be the last person to see JR alive. Maurice tracked Pillman down to his job, but he wasn't there. His employer mentioned he was staying at a local Quality Inn. When Maurice knocked on the door of the hotel room, there was no answer. He then called Pillman's cell phone. As soon as Maurice identified himself as a detective, Pillman hung up the phone. In the mind of an investigator, hanging up on the police is a quick way to become a primary suspect. It suggests that you have something to hide. Maurice called him back, this time taking a more direct approach, explaining that he was investigating the death of Leon Harrison Jr. Pillman finally agreed to talk. He admitted that he had called JR to buy some marijuana for a birthday celebration. He claimed that JR had agreed to come by the hotel, but he never showed up. A second call was made, but JR did not answer. Maurice checked the phone records, and they perfectly matched Pillman's story. The second call lasted only 15 to 20 seconds, which is consistent with a call that goes to voicemail or remains unanswered. Pillman was dropped as a suspect. The investigation was now 2 weeks behind because the body had been in the river for so long. Maurice knew he had to keep moving. He eventually located Taishra at her job, where she worked as a security guard at a local steel mill. JR had also worked at that same mill. When the detectives broke the news of her husband's death, they brought her to the police department for a formal interview. Initially, Taish painted a picture of a good marriage, but the story quickly shifted. She admitted that money had been a major problem, which had forced them to move in with her father and brother. She also claimed that both she and JR had struggled with infidelity. She told the investigators that she had kicked JR out after discovering he was cheating, but they had maintained an on-again, off-again relationship. Taish claimed that the last time she saw her husband was on the night of February 20th. She said he had come by her house around 10 o'clock in the evening to pick up some clothes. According to her, While he was there, he was on the phone with another woman whom she identified as Rosario. Taish described a heated argument between JR and Rosario, characterizing Rosario as a maniacal, jealous, and out-of-control woman. This was a classic tactical move in a criminal psychological profile, redirecting the blame toward a third party by painting them as unstable. Maurice now had to find Rosario. When she arrived at the police station, she told a very different story. She spoke of her deep love for JR and her heartbreak over his death. When asked why she hadn't reported him missing, she explained that she didn't want to interfere with his life or his marriage, thinking perhaps he was just laying low due to the drama with his wife. Rosario described Taish as the one who was unfaithful and the source of the conflict. She told the detectives that on the night of February 12th, it was Taish who had called her from JR's phone, ranting, raving, and screaming threats. Rosario handed over her phone, and the text, history, and call logs confirmed her version of events. There was no evidence of Rosario being a killer. She was simply a woman in love with a man who was caught in a volatile situation. The focus shifted back to Taish and her family. Rosario had mentioned that Taish's brother, Alex Ra Jr., and her father, Alex Ra Sr., both harbored an intense hatred for JR. They viewed JR as a bad influence. Alex Jr. saw himself as his sister's protector. Maurice was now looking at a complicated family web. He knew he needed physical evidence. The speaker wire used to bind the victim became the focal point. He searched local stores, including Walmart, to see if he could find a match for that specific type of wire, but he came up empty. Then, a piece of information clicked. Alex Ra Jr. worked at a garage where he installed custom. This meant he worked with speaker wire every day. Maurice went to the garage, but Alex Jr. wasn't there. The manager allowed Maurice to examine the wire used at the shop, but it didn't match the wire found on. It seemed the wire could have come from anywhere, and the investigators still lacked a crime scene. JR was found in the river, but where was he killed? The most likely location was the Ra household on High Market Street. Maurice obtained a search warrant based on the circumstantial evidence they had gathered. When the police arrived to execute the warrant, Taish, her brother, and her father were all present. During the search of the home, the investigators walked into Taish's bedroom. They noticed something highly suspicious about the carpet. There were sections that had been cut out and replaced at odd angles. When they pulled up the carpet and the padding, they found what appeared to be a massive stain on the side. A presumptive test confirmed it was blood. It wasn't just a small spot. The blood had soaked through the padding and into the wood of the floor. There were signs of an extensive cleanup effort. Forensic experts also found high-valence blood spatter on the walls, the kind of pattern produced by blunt force trauma. This was the missing crime scene. The blood was sent to a lab, and it was a definitive match for Leon Harrison Jr. JR had met his end in that bedroom. However, knowing a crime happened and proving who did it are two different things in a court of law. Maurice brought Taish back in for questioning. He showed her the photos of the blood-soaked sub. Her excuse was that it was simply a nosebleed. Maurice countered with the logical observation that even a fire hose up a nose wouldn't produce that much blood. This was the blood of a person who had suffered a life-threatening injury. Taish insisted she would never hurt her husband, and that she missed him from the bottom of her heart. When she requested a lawyer, the interview ended. The investigators still needed more to secure a conviction. Then, a witness named Andrew Johnson came forward. He told the police that a few weeks after JR went missing, Alex Ra Jr. had asked him to help a friend move furniture in Myrtle Beach. During that trip, Alex Jr. had allegedly made incriminating comments while laughing about the situation. Maurice checked the GPS data from Alex Jr.'s phone, which confirmed the trip to Myrtle Beach had taken place exactly as Johnson described. More importantly, the GPS data revealed another stop. At 2 o'clock in the morning on February 20th, the night the murder likely occurred, Alex Ra Jr. had gone to a local Walmart. The investigators spent hours reviewing surveillance footage from the store. They found Alex Jr. and his father, Alex Ra Sr., on camera. They were not buying furniture or household goods. They were buying hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is a well-known agent for cleaning blood. The sight of a father and son buying cleaning supplies in the middle of the night, after a man has disappeared, is a powerful piece of evidence. It was the final nail in the coffin for the Ra family's defense. The evidence allowed the investigators to reconstruct the final moments of JR's life. Taish had lured him to the house with the promise of a reconciliation, even texting him about a candlelight dinner and a bath. JR walked into that bedroom expecting a romantic evening, but instead, he walked into a trap. He was ambushed, beaten, and bound with speaker wire by Taish and her brother. The father joined in the effort to clean up the blood and dispose of the body. They took him to the Black River and threw him in, hoping the currents would carry him to the Atlantic Ocean where he would never be found. In the end, justice was served. A jury determined that while the father was involved in the cleanup and obstruction of justice, Taish and Alex Jr. were the primary killers. Taish and Alex Ra Jr. were each sentenced to 37 years in prison for murder. Alex Ra Sr. was sentenced to 8 years for his role in the coup. For Brittany Green and her children, the verdict brought tears of relief. While nothing can bring JR back, the knowledge that those responsible are facing the consequences of their actions provides a sense of peace. Every year, they release balloons at the river and visit his favorite restaurant to keep his memory alive. JR remains a presence in their lives, especially for his son, who still feels his father's spirit with him on the football field. This case was a profound experience for investigator Alan Morris. It was his first homicide, and it tested every skill he possessed as an investigator. It served as a reminder that good police work is a necessary response to the darker side of the human condition. Law enforcement cannot prevent every tragedy, but it can ensure that there are consequences for those who choose to commit such heinous acts. The shadows of the Black River were finally lifted by the light of the truth, proving once again that no matter how hard someone tries to hide a crime, a dedicated detective will find the way to justice. It is a quiet Saturday morning on March 11, 2017, in the town of Georgetown, South Carolina. The air carries the heavy scent of the low country, a mix of salt marsh and ancient trees. A local resident is plying his hobby of fishing on the Black River, seeking the solace of the current. However, the water today does not offer peace. He notices something caught in the reeds, something that does not belong to the natural order of the river. As he moves closer, the alarm in his chest tightens. It is a human body, floating, silent, and discarded. This is the beginning of a journey into the dark heart of human emotion. For a detective, a body in the water is more than a tragedy. It is a complex riddle written in the language of decay and desperation. Closing a murder case requires a rare breed of individual, someone capable of looking past the horror to find the truth that the dead can no longer speak. This is what it means to be an American detective. Investigator Alan Morris is the man who answers the call. In Georgetown, they called them investigators rather than detectives, a title that implies a general mastery of everything from fraud and burglary to the sudden, jarring reality of homicide. Maurice knows that a normal day can turn into a frantic race for justice in a single heartbeat. When he receives the call at approximately 1:30 that afternoon, he enters a world where the stakes are life and death. Upon arriving at the riverbank, Maurice observes the grim process of recovery. Law enforcement officers must physically grasp the individual by his clothing to ease him back to shore. At first glance, one might wonder if this was a simple accident, a fall from a boat or a tragic drowning. But the moment the victim reaches the shore, the illusion of an accident vanishes. The wrists and ankles are bound tightly with speaker wire. This is not a victim of the river. This is a victim of a calculated, uncivilized act of homicide. Water is a cruel environment for an investigation. It does terrible things to human remains, accelerating decomposition and washing away the fragile traces of DNA or fingerprints that might otherwise lead to a killer. In the heat of the South, even in February and March, the elements are the face of the victim is unrecognizable, lost to the passage of time and the environment. Positive identification seems impossible at first, yet Maurice carries a memory of a missing person report filed 2 weeks prior. Brittany Green had come to the station to report the disappearance of Leon Harrison Jr., known to everyone as JR. He was the father of her 2 children, a man who, despite no longer living with her, called every single night to speak to his little ones. When those calls stopped for 14 days, Brittany knew in her heart that something was terribly wrong. A man with family, with loved ones, with children who adore him, does not simply vanish from the earth without a reason. JR was 32 years old, an African-American male with a distinct identifier, a rose tattooed on his inner right forearm. For investigator Maurice, this is a significant milestone. He usually handles property crimes, but the discovery in the Black River has handed him his very first homicide case. The weight of responsibility is heavy as he attends the autopsy. To a seasoned veteran, an autopsy is a clinical necessity, but for the new guy, the first one is a shock to the system. Seeing a human being bound hand and foot, discarded like trash, is a reminder of how uncivilized the world can be. The medical examiner provides a bleak assessment. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, a specific cause of death is difficult to pinpoint. There are lacerations on the belly, but they are not deep enough to have caused him to bleed to death. There are signs of animal activity in the water, including the presence of alligators, though the examiner notes that these predators typically prefer live targets. While blunt force trauma is a possibility, the findings are mostly However, the one thing the water could not hide was the rose on the right arm. The missing person case is now officially a homicide. In the world of homicide investigation, the transition from the new guy to the old guy happens in about 30 minutes of intense pressure. Maurice begins by reconstructing the life of the victim. Brittany Green describes JR as a funny, outgoing man with a big personality, a loving father who met his son in the end zone after his first touchdown. He was a man connected to his children, a man who would never simply walk away. But every life has its complications. Brittany points Morris toward an estranged wife named Taish Rue. The investigation reveals that JR and Taish had married in September of 2015, but the relationship was far from happy. Money troubles had forced them to move in with Taish's father and brother, and the marriage was eventually torn apart by allegations of infidelity. This provides a classic motive: the scorned spouse. However, locating Taish proves difficult at first. Maurice turns his attention to JR's phone records, looking for the last person to speak with him. The records show 2 calls on the evening of February 25th from a man named Samuel Pillman. When Maurice attempts to contact Pillman, the man hangs up the phone, a move that immediately raises suspicion. In the mind of a detective, hanging up on the police is a loud announcement that you have something to